Hello friends, I welcome you all to Scholar. This is Akshaya and I take your Medieval History course here. Today we are starting the lesson number 14, which is essentially going to be about the Khilji dynasty. It is a very important dynasty of the Delhi Sultanate and it is also very important from the exam perspective. So before we talk about the Khilji dynasty, let's first take a quick look at what we've covered so far. So a quick recap we'll take before we start with the Khiljis. So essentially, we've covered the slave dynasty. We had learned the foundation of the Delhi Sultanate and we understood that the period that spans the Delhi Sultanate is 1206 to 1526, and there are these 5 dynasties which are to be covered, and first is your slave dynasty, and we have covered the slave dynasty already, and today we are going to essentially start with the Khilji dynasty. Right, so in the slave dynasty we discuss these rulers in detail. Aybak, the founder of the Sultanate, then Iltutmish, Razia and Balban. So this is essentially what we discussed in your last lesson, and today we are talking about the Khilji dynasty, and there are 2 key rulers that we are going to focus more on, primarily Alauddin Khilji, but more so Jalaluddin. We'll see why, and we'll also understand the reasons for decline, as in how did it come to an end and what were the important contributions of this dynasty to the history of India and society and etc. Right, so yes, so starting with the Khilji dynasty, we see the time span is 1290 to 1320. So you can see the time span is not too long, it is around your 30 years, and there are 4 rulers, the name of the 4 rulers that I have put here, out of which you can see that only Alauddin Khilji is the one that I have star marked or I have highlighted, and he had a reign of around 20 years, and rest are not so important except Jalaluddin Khilji, because he is your founder. I mean, he's the founder of the Khilji dynasty. So starting with the Khilji dynasty, starting with Jalaluddin Khilji, as I said, he was the founder of the Khilji dynasty and his original name was Firoz. Jalaluddin is like a title that they take, so as to sound like a sultan's name, but his real name was Firoz, and he was a member of the Chalisa or the Chehelgami or the 40. You remember we discussed under Iltutmish it was established, and then Balban didn't like it, etc. So the 40, he was a member of this the 40, and he was essentially the Mumalik-e-Ariz, or he was the minister of war or the in charge of the military department under which sultan? Under Balban. So this is why you see, since he was there since the time of Balban, by the time he could take over the throne finally, he was very old. He was around 70 years old, and because he was not a very strong sultan, he was generous and lenient, So we will see, this is how the whole narrative will go around in our history. Whenever we see a strong ruler, militarily a very capable, strong ruler who has consolidated his position, then you would see that, they are more ruthless when it comes to governance. For instance, Balban was very ruthless, and but whenever, he understands that he's not really strong, they would be more generous and lenient. Of course, there are exceptions like Akbar, we'll see later, but this is generally how the trend is. So Jalaluddin was very generous and lenient, he was tolerant, and he was the first sultan, you can remember, who was tolerant and benevolent towards other religions also. So even if somebody is a Hindu, he was tolerant of them and he was benevolent, he would let them practice their religion, right? And at that time we understood, even in the last lecture we studied, that Mongols was a big threat to the to India. So what was his Mongol policy? His Mongol policy was of, you can say, non-interference and not contesting against the Mongols. Rather, he married his daughter. So his policy was a policy of friendship and matrimonial alliance and good terms in order to save the Indian frontiers from the wrath of the Mongols. So this was his Mongol policy, and it worked also, right? And but we can see that he had a very short span, just around 6 years. So during his reign, 2 years before he was killed, in 1294, Devgiri. Devgiri was the capital of Gujarat at that time, and Deogiri. There's an important dynasty which we'll see, ruling at that time. And Devgiri was essentially invaded by his governor. One of his governors was Alauddin Khilji, and he invaded Devgiri in 1294, and he finally killed the Sultan Jalaluddin Khilji in 1296, and he took over the throne. Right, so we understood the importance of Jalaluddin Khilji is that he was the founder, and he was very old by the time he came to the throne. He was formerly a member of the Chalisa or the 40, and he was the first sultan who was benevolent and tolerant towards other religions. So these are the most important things that you need to remember about Jalaluddin Khilji. Okay, so this is the map which gives you an idea of the spread of the Khilji dynasty. Okay, this is essentially, it's quite vast, as we can see, and we're going to study about how were the different conquests done as to have, well, this is the Khilji dynasty at its peak, right? Okay, now we have Alauddin Khilji. Alauddin Khilji, you see, was the most powerful of the Sultanate rulers. Not just the Khiljis, but the entire Sultanate. Those 5 dynasties, Alauddin is the most powerful ruler, and he calls himself as the second Alexander. Alexander, why? Because we know that Alexander was somebody who was the world conqueror, who went on to conquer the world, and he was undefeated everywhere, right? So that kind of a position he saw for himself, and that was his vision, and this is why he called himself in Persian Sikandar-e-Sani. Second Alexander, Sikandar-e-Sani, or Sikandar-e-Azam also, right? So this is what Alauddin had kind of visioned for himself. And what was his Mongol policy? Now, what I said essentially you will see here, because he was a strong ruler, he had entire faith, not too old when he came the throne. So he had a policy of repelling or fighting the Mongols, not a policy of friendship and matrimonial alliances as was with Jalaluddin. So he repelled the Mongols, defeated the Mongols successfully around 12 times, a dozen times, okay. And he did not believe in the policy of tolerance, rather he believed in Balban's policy of ruthless governance, right? So like I said, strong rulers will not really resort to tolerance, because they know that, even if they use ruthless measures, they are strong enough to defeat others and consolidate their position, right? And what was his theory of kingship? He said, kingship knows no kinship. So there was no place for kinship and nepotism in his, you can say, in his rule, and he only believed in the talent and capabilities of the concerned officials. Also, he refuted the authority or suzerainty of the caliph. He did not believe in any other ruler or any other, power except himself. He said that I am the number one. There is no caliph, nobody who is above me. So that's what Alauddin Khilji essentially thought, and he considered his power independent of anybody else, including the caliph. Why is the refuting of caliph's authority so important? Because caliph was the authority or the symbol of unity or authority for the whole Islamic world. So this was a big thing that Alauddin refuted his authority. And we will see later that other sultans also, they ruled in the name of caliph, but Alauddin did not do that. Now, having said that, also we'll study, this is something which comes from his, it's a continuation. The similar kind of policy he had towards nobles also. Now, nobles, again, understand here that nobles were essentially sharing power with the king, right? So Alauddin did not like that, because he was a strong ruler, so he wanted all the power in his own hands. So his policy towards nobles will also be something which comes from that. What is his policy? He would want everybody, on his side, supporting him. So he would either initially give them gifts, etc., right? And if that doesn't happen, then strict regulations upon the nobles also. Also, Ziauddin Barani, a historian of that time, he has said that Alauddin thought there were 4 reasons. There were 4 reasons, Alauddin said, which were responsible why nobles' power was increasing, or why nobles were so powerful. What were those reasons? General prosperity of the nobles, right? So if somebody is rich, obviously they are powerful. So if nobles will be rich, will be prosperous, they will have, power which king will have to share. That was the first reason. Second was intermarriages, Again, if there are two noble families and they marry amongst each other, so it becomes like a bigger, stronger family. Matrimonial alliances, that's how they work. So intermarriage between nobles is something which increases the power of the nobles. Again, something that Alauddin said. Third was, he said that the spy system is not efficient enough. Sultan does not know what kind of conspiracies or plots the nobles are hatching against the Sultan. That was the third reason. And fourth reason that he thought was drinking. Drinking he considered a vice, and he thought that drinking is some kind of a, you can understand it as a rewarding mechanism which, nobles could use in order to, employ people and, kind of use people against Sultan. So this was the fourth reason why what he Alauddin considered for the power of the nobles. Now, after he gave or thought of these reasons for the nobles' power, he came up with the respective reforms. So this is the problem or the reason, and this is the reform. So we'll see problem wise the reforms. First problem we understood was the general richness or the prosperity of the nobles. So what was the reform that he brought? Take away their property, confiscate or impound their property. When they will not have any property, they will not be rich and they will not be powerful. Second, intermarriages. Then he said, my permission is mandatory. Sultan's permission is mandatory for two families to solemnize any marriage. So this is the second reform that he brought about. Third was that he reorganized the entire intelligence system or the spy system, because we understood that he thought that inefficient spy system was the third reason. So he reorganized the entire intelligence system, and he brought certain changes in the spy system also. And lastly, about the drinking, he said, let's put a complete ban on, the public sale of liquor. Nobody can buy, nobody can sell liquor, and when the liquor cannot be sold, then nobles cannot use liquor as a rewarding mechanism to employ people to work for them and, hence work against the Sultan. You've understood, right? So I'll just repeat quickly. 4 reasons are: nobles are rich, nobles are intermarrying amongst themselves, the spy system is not efficient enough, and drinking. These were the 4 reasons for the power of the nobles. Accordingly, the reforms: prosperity के लिए confiscate their property. For prosperity of the nobles, take away their property. For intermarriages, no marriage without the Sultan's permission. For spy system, reorganize the whole system, reforms to the spy system. And drinking, complete ban on the public sale of liquor. Right? So this is an important topic. What were the reforms or the changes that he brought about in the administration, especially his policy towards the nobles, right? And as expected, the reforms did pay, and his position was indeed strengthened. So now this is the empire during Alauddin. You can see, essentially, we studied in one of the slides, that was this portion, but all of this region also I have added, because under one of his general, we'll just see, shortly, he actually conquered all of this region as well. Okay, so all of these, states, even if they were not officially added to the Sultanate, but still they accepted the authority of Alauddin. So under Alauddin, actually the Sultanate was at its peak. He had penetrated in the Deccan and South also. We'll just quickly see. Okay, now, so for this empire, for this kind of an empire, this huge empire, he conducted several conquests. That is essentially what we are going to study now. So starting with the first conquest, which is in Gujarat. Why Gujarat? Because Gujarat is a rich state. It has seaports, and Alauddin wants a strong army. He wants to import horses, etc. So he wants a seaports. And who were the ruling class there? Vaghelas were the ruling class in Gujarat. So Vaghelas were destroyed and defeated. Temple of Somnath was destroyed. And an important thing that he got from Gujarat was the slave general Malik Kafur. Please remember this name, an extremely important character in medieval history, and we'll just see why. So where did he get Malik Kafur from? Gujarat. After his conquest of Gujarat, Alauddin got Malik Kafur with him to Delhi. Okay, and then after Gujarat, he moved to Ranthambore. Ranthambore, was so basically after Gujarat, he turned his head towards Rajputana. Rajputana were a strong power, we understood in one of the lectures, Rajput's kingdom, you know. So he wanted to destroy the Rajputana actually. And where did he start from? The Ranthambore. Ranthambore fort, why? Because Ranthambore fort, it was the strongest fort of Rajasthan, and it was critical for him to destroy Ranthambore, so that he sends a strong message to the entire Rajput community that I have destroyed your pride, your morale, and you know, morally they are already defeated, the other Rajputs. And of course, it was a protracted battle. It lasted quite long, for around 3 months, but ultimately Ranthambore was conquered, and Ranthambore was added to Khilji's empire. Next, he moved to Chittor. Now, why Chittor? So the first reason, they say, the historians, they have this opinion that in Jayasri's Padmavat, this is an epic written by Jayasri's, so it's essentially mentioned that Rani Padmini was, who was the queen of Raja Ratan Singh, the king of Chittor. She was a very beautiful woman, and Alauddin Khilji wanted to marry, you know, Rani Padmini, but of course, because king would not agree, why would he send his wife? So essentially the two fought. There's another reason sometimes, that Raja Ratan Singh had refused to help Alauddin when he had gone for Gujarat conquest in 1299. That was the other reason. But so ultimately, with these reasons, he did, you know, succeed in what he wanted to do. He was able to conquer Chittor as well, and Chittor was finally renamed as Khizrabad. Khizra Khan was one of the sons of Sultan, after whom he renamed the city of Chittor. And then he moved to Malwa and others, essentially, and he conquered Ujjain, Mandu, Dhar. These are the regions around the central India, yeah, and these were also conquered. Then Sivana, Jalore. So ultimately, by 1311, essentially, he conquered the complete North India, and he conquered large parts of the Rajputana. Okay. Around the same time, you see, from 1305, Sultan is going towards the Rajputana. At the same time, he sent this person. Who is this person? He is the person I said is really important, that is Malik Kafur. He sends Malik Kafur to Deccan and South, and around 1305 to 11, Kafur does these expeditions for Sultan, and he wins over the four important states or the kingdoms, and he conquers Devagiri, Warangal, Dwarasamudra, Madurai. Yeah, and these were the dynasty: Yadavas, Kakatiyas, Hoysalas, Pandyas. Yeah, dynasties are the respective states, how I have written. And who were the rulers essentially he fought. All of these things are not important, but just remember the names of the important cities, you know, and which he conquered on his way, on his Deccan and South expedition. Also, he went until almost Rameshwaram. You can see it's the complete south, right? And he built a mosque there in Rameshwaram. Now, let's try and look at a map at Alauddin's empire and Kafur's. So, that's essentially what I showed you in the starting, the kingdom of Khilji. And this is from where, you know, Kafur takes his expedition: Devagiri, Dwarasamudra, okay, Madurai, and even until Rameshwaram. This is where he built that mosque in Rameshwaram. Okay, so we have understood the conquests of Sultan, we have understood his general administration and, you know, his policy towards the nobles. Now we'll talk about a very notable feature of Alauddin's reign, which is the notable reforms, some key notable reforms that Alauddin had brought about. And these, to put them very broadly, he brought certain reforms in the military, certain reforms in the market or the economic reforms, and certain reforms in the land revenue administration, right? So we'll study them one by one, starting off with the market reforms. So the market reforms, sometimes they are touted as the most important policy initiatives of his reign. And before we understand the reforms, we should understand why did he want to bring about these reforms. So he basically wanted to control the markets and the prices, you know, so that they don't go haywire, the prices. But why was he wanting to control the prices? What was the reason? From the very start, please, so whenever, these kind of questions are being asked, also try to you can exercise your brains and think why would have such kind of a reform been brought about. So these reforms were brought because we studied from the start that he was a strong ruler, wanted a strong empire and strong army. So essentially, how do we build a strong empire? By using a strong army, large strong army. For a strong army, you need to pay your soldiers regularly. Soldiers should have a good life, because if that doesn't happen, then they can revolt or mutiny against the Sultan. So to control all of that, they say that Alauddin brought about these reforms so that his soldiers can have a good life. Okay, and essentially that is what is the logic behind his market reforms, they say. There's another opinion of the historians who say that he genuinely wanted to benefit the people, etc. But you can remember that you should mention the role of the army and his desire to build a strong army linked to the market reforms, because this desire for a big army, big empire is something which is very keynote feature of this Sultan, that is Alauddin Khilji. Anyway, coming back to the market reforms, I said the most important policy initiatives. So he was wanting to control the markets and he was wanting to control the prices. So what he did was that he lowered the prices of the commodities which were of daily use and he fixed them. He said that you cannot charge a price above this. And he came up with 4 separate markets in Delhi. One was for grain market, then clothes and groceries, then horses, slaves, cattle, and then miscellaneous items, things other than that. So there were 4 markets in Delhi depending on the category of product that you are wanting to buy. Okay. Other reforms were that he appointed certain officers controlling each market, right? And what was the name of the officer? Shahnai-e-Mandi. So these terms are important. You should remember these terms. Shahnai-e-Mandi, Diwan-e-Riyasat. We'll do one by one. But please, I'll give you a suggestion. Maybe you can make a separate sheet and you can put all these terms, what these terms essentially mean. Okay. So yeah, so back to the reforms. Shahnai-e-Mandi, officer controlling each market. Also 2 other officers, Barids and Munians, intelligence officers and the secret spies. And then why these secret spies and intelligence officers? So as to have the inside information, right? That is somebody charging a price above what Sultan has fixed. And also he established some state storehouses so as to maintain regular supply, and he fixed the price for all commodities. Why the storehouses by the state storehouses? So that if there's a scarcity, for instance, even during famines, etc., the prices were the same. How was that possible? Because there were state storehouses who would come into the picture if there's a scarcity. Essentially, you can understand their role similar to what FCI does, you know, in the present times, Food Corporation of India. Okay. So, and then despite of all this, if somebody tries to violate the Sultan's orders, there is going to be very harsh punishment, he said. Hoarding was not allowed, obviously, because hoarding would lead to shoot up of the prices, and there was a separate market department which was set up called as Diwan-e-Riyasat, and the officer heading the department was Naib-e-Riyasat, and under this department all the merchants were to be registered. Why merchants register? To keep a better track. If you have a list of all the merchants, then you can better track, you know, what prices are they charging, etc. So these were some market reforms, very, very keynote feature of Alauddin's reign, market reforms that he brought about. Why did he brought about, and what were the main reforms? Okay, now we'll go to the military reforms. Military reforms were essentially, again, his entire focus on building a strong empire, strong army. So he would obviously revamp the military structure, and that's essentially what he did. He came up with a very large permanent standing army. So we had understood that in the feudalistic pattern, the central power would depend on the feudal chief's army, and they would ask for their military help whenever they want to conquer. Large standing army means that I will have my own army of lakhs and lakhs of soldiers stationed in Delhi where the Sultan is, and whenever he wants to fight a big battle or a war, he would take his own army. Okay, and why this kind of a reform? So that he does not have to depend on anybody, and he could be assured of his own position. Okay, so he came up with a very large standing army. Try to recall somebody who did something similar. strong, a large standing army? Balban. Balban again was a ruler who wanted ruthless governance and he wanted a strong position. So I'm just giving you an example as to how you can relate these things and remember these things. Okay. Second was the cash payments were started. So soldiers would be paid in cash. Again, satisfaction of the soldiers, happy with the Sultan, will fight for the Sultan with all their commitment. So cash payments were started for the soldiers. Then there was a system of dag. Dag is branding of horses. So some kind of a symbol or some branding they would do on the horses to identify that, oh, these are the best quality horses which I want to put in my army, because there was a reliance or strong cavalry basically. And this is why he would have around 4,75,000 cavalrymen, right? And you can see he was importing horses, so he does not want any low quality horses in his cavalry. So the imported best quality horses would be branded in order to identify or differentiate the horses of the Sultan's army. Then Hulia and Chehra. Hulia and Chehra were, I'm sure you've come across these terms. Chehra basically refers to face and Hulia is the description of a person. You must have heard these terms in movies, etc. Somebody is, on run. So then the policeman will ask, can you tell me the Hulia? Uska Hulia batao. Something like that. Okay. So this is essentially what Hulia and Chehra mean. Description of each soldier, how he looks, how tall, fair, dark, those kind of things. So that is a detailed description of each soldier. And strict periodic, okay, now why this? Why detailed description of each soldier? Same logic, so that he knows that no outsider tries to get inside his army and, some kind of a treachery can't be done to the Sultan. Next is the strict periodic review of the army. Time to time he will review how is the army doing. That was the next one. And lastly, again, imported horses and a very strong, huge number of cavalrymen. Right? Okay. So now we've come to the land revenue administration, the third kind of reforms that he had brought about. So he was the first Sultan who made the land measurement compulsory. He said land measurement is compulsory and we are going to charge revenue on the basis of the land measurement. Okay. And all the landlords, be it big, small, everybody has to pay. And everybody has to pay in cash. Paying the soldiers also in cash, taking the revenue also in cash. Essentially for the same reason, in order to enable the Sultan to pay the soldiers in cash. Okay. And he set up a different department which was called as Diwan-e important, really important, Diwan-e Mustakhraj. This department was established so as to know that arrears, you understand, so something is pending for someone, somebody hasn't paid. So to keep a track of those revenue collection, a separate department was set up, and this department was called as Diwan-e Mustakhraj. It was set up by Alauddin Khilji. So we have discussed his notable reforms: military, market and land revenue administration. Now we're going to talk about the contribution of Alauddin Khilji towards art and culture. So you see, the Sultan himself was illiterate. He was not literate, but he was a great patron. He wanted to have all these great poets and etc. at his court. So he had two great poets that you should remember: Amir Khusro, extremely important cultural figure, and Mir Hasan Dehlvi, again an important name. Khusro was given the title of Parrot of India, or Tootie-e-Hind, Persian Tootie-e-Hind, Parrot of India. This is essentially a title given to Amir Khusro by Alauddin Khilji only. And Amir Khusro is called as father of Urdu, the language that we speak today, Urdu, Hindi. So he is called as the father of Urdu, and he is said to have invented sitar. He invented the string instrument sitar, which is a very important part of the Indian music today. And two famous works that he has written are Laila Majnu and Tughlaqnama. Laila Majnu we all know. It's the Romeo Juliet of India. This was written by Amir Khusro, and this is about Amir Khusro. And who had Amir Khusro? Alauddin Khilji had Amir Khusro at his court. Now certain constructions or buildings that he built the Alai Darwaza. Alai Darwaza is this, which is essentially the gateway to your Qutub Minar or Qutub complex. Qutub Minar we studied. Who had built the Qutub Minar? It was built by started by Aybak and completed by Iltutmish, and built in the honor of not Kutubuddin Aybak but the saint Qutub Bakhtiar Kaki. So remember that those facts, and the entrance or the gateway to Qutub Minar is built by not Iltutmish or Kutubuddin but Alauddin Khilji. You can remember Alai. This is essentially how this is named. And also he had built the complex of Hauz Khas and some other buildings, not really important, but I have put them here so that you can just pass through these names if at all there are. Mahal Hazar Satun, Jamaat Khana Mosque and Alai Minar. Alai, remember, it comes from his name. Alai, remember, I mean, this is how I want you to remember. Alauddin, Alai Minar, Alauddin, Alai Darwaza. Okay, and he also built the new capital at Siri. This is one of the another city. Jahanpana is another one we had studied in a previous lecture, and next was Siri. So who had built the city of Siri? Alauddin Khilji had built that city. Now after Alauddin died, the Sultanate was in complete confusion because there was no obvious successor. Then Malik Kafur sat on the throne, and because he was the strong figure during the times of Alauddin, but he was deposed by Alauddin's son Kutubuddin Mubarak Shah. And Kutubuddin Mubarak Shah, he declared himself the caliph, just like his father. He did not believe in the authority of the caliph of Baghdad. He called himself the caliph, and he took this title, Al-Wasiq Billah. He cancelled all the harsh regulations of his father. He was not as harsh as his father, and but his administration was not very smooth, you can understand. And during his reign, the Sultanate started declining, and many rebellions, etc., had also, broken out. Finally, he was murdered, and Khusro Shah ascended the throne. Khusro Shah, he ruled for hardly 2-3 months, but just so that we know the last ruler in a dynasty, I have put his name here. Also, he is important because he is the only Hindu convert. This is important. Who is the only Hindu convert to have ever sat on the throne of Delhi? It is Nasiruddin Khusro Shah. This fact maybe you can remember. And he kills the previous sultan, that is, he kills Kutubuddin Mubarak Shah. Yeah. And he is then finally, he himself is killed by certain group of dissatisfied officers and generals in his sultanate, and the leader of these dissatisfied officers is Ghazi Malik. Ghazi Malik was one of the governors under Alauddin and Khusro and these people, and then he rises up and he kills Khusro Shah. And after killing Khusro, Ghazi Malik himself ascends the throne under the title of Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq. Remember, Firoz took the title of Jalaluddin Khilji. Similarly, Ghazi takes the title of Ghiyasuddin, so as to have a name that sounds like Sultan, right? And that is how in 1320, then Tughlaq dynasty is founded. And just after 4 years of the death of Alauddin, which is the star of the Khiljis, the Khilji dynasty comes to an end and the power passes into the hands of Tughlaqs. Okay, so what all have we learned today? Quick sum up. We started off with the foundation of Khilji dynasty. We studied about Jalaluddin Khilji, who is the founder. Then we studied about Alauddin Khilji in great detail. His famous conquests we studied, his policy towards nobles we studied, his military reforms, his market reforms, his land revenue administration. All these things we studied in detail. And finally, we studied the end of the Khilji dynasty. Okay, so yeah, I mean, right, that brings us to the end of this lecture, and in the next lecture we are going to start with the Tughlaq dynasty. But for now, that's all we have. Thank you so much for watching, and for more such videos for your UPSC preparation, please log on to our website scholar.com. Thank you once again.